Okay, let's spend a little bit of time talking about events and click events in particular. So he says, what is an event? An event is something that happens. So your birthday is an event. And so is Christmas. APU graduation is an event. An event in programming terminology is when something happens. These events are so special that they are built into the programming language. VB.NET has numerous events that you can write code for. So we've been using often the click event. So when someone clicks, for example, on a button, we write code to respond to that event. So he says buttons have the ability to be clicked on. When you click a button, when you click on a button, an event is fired. The event that is fired is the click event. So we have different so-called events that occur, and the handlers are, when it says handles and then a particular event, they respond to that event. So if you were to add a new button to a form and then double click on it, you would see the following code stub. By the way, he uses this phrase, code stub. This is called the code stub from here and here. That's before you've written anything inside. This is just like the basic form for the code, and then we put our code inside there. So he refers to that as the code stub. So as we said before, what follows this word handles is the event name. Okay, so it handles that event. And he also says that if you just ignored what was in the parentheses, took that out, you would have this. So it's private sub button one click handles button one click. You can have this button one click handle other things too. It can handle the click event of other buttons. For example, try this. Start a new project, give it the name events. When your new form appears, add two buttons to it. Double click one button to bring up the code. At the end of the first line of the button, add this. So after this, put in this as well. So we have a second button, and we're going to put it here, comma that. Okay, that means that the same code that you put in here will run when button 2 is clicked as well as button 1. So here's what we're going to have. We're going to have this. It handles button 1 click, comma, button 2 click. And then put something inside here so we can see some results. So he puts a message box in there. And run your program. Then click both buttons in turn. So click the first one, see what happens. Click the second one, see what happens. He says the reason they both ran that code is because the events that button 1 click subroutine can handle are at the end, and the events for button 2 and button 1 are together. And he says you can add as many events at the end as you like. So if you had 4 buttons, you could put them all here, and they would all run the same code. He says, however, if you, after you've put 4 buttons on there, if you double click on, say, button 2 to try to bring up its coding window, you'd find the cursor is flashing inside the code of button 1 click, inside of button 1 click. Okay, because you've attached the click event of button 2 to the button 1 subroutine. So you can't have a separate click event for just button 2 because you've already put it here. Okay, the next thing he says is let's examine the arguments that go into a button click event. So here, in other words, from here to here, the arguments, so, or the parameters. So here it is. So we see it's there. This is by val. They're both by val, and that usually we have something like as string here, or as string here, or as integer, or something like that. But here we instead have system.object and system.event args. Okay, and the name of the two variables are sender and e. This sets up two variables, one called sender and one called e. Instead of sender being an integer, so it's not an integer, or a string variable, the type of variable set up for sender is system object. So object is, as we've said before, is a very broad category. So it really can be anything. But anyway, this stores a reference to a control. So, for example, we clicked on a button, so it would store a reference to the button object. So that's what sender will be. For the e variable, this is holding an object as well. This is also a type of object, actually. And the object is going to contain information about the event. So one is information about the control, and one is about the event. For a button, if you click on a button, then the event information might be which mouse button was clicked. So was it the right one or the left one, or where the mouse pointer was on the screen. So that's the kind of information that this one and this one are containing. And then later on, if we want to, we can access that information quite easily, because these are objects. So we could look at what's inside. He says because this was the click event, there's not much more information available. Either the button was clicked or it wasn't. Okay, but you can use other events available to the button. One of these is the mouse down event. So instead of the click event, we can just have the mouse down event. It's a different event. The information for the event would be which button was clicked, where the mouse pointer was when the mouse button was held down, and something called delta, a count of how many notches have been rotated on a mouse wheel. Let's explore the mouse down event. Okay, let's go on to that. So the mouse down event is available to many controls, not, for example, just the button control, but many controls will respond or can respond to a mouse down event. Even a form, even the form itself, can detect when the mouse was held down on it, and also a text box can detect when the mouse was held down inside of it. And a button can detect which mouse button was held down to do the clicking. So was it the right button or the left button? So we'll see how this works. And remember, it's going to be, the information is going to be contained in either the sender variable or the e variable. And so we can access it. Okay, it says first delete all the buttons except for one. You can click on a control to delete it. If you haven't been following along from the previous lesson, to just create a new project and add a button to your form. So we just want to have one button, and we'll call it button 1. Go back to your coding window and delete any code for the button on your form. So get rid of all the code. Delete any handles code except handles button 1 click. Your coding window should look something like this one. And up at the top here we have button 1 and we have click. So these are this is, if you click over here, you'll see all the different controls on the form, including the form itself. And if you click here, you'll see all the different events associated with what you have selected over here. So he says click on the right side on this one, and you can see the different events that that button 1 can respond to, and one of them is mouse down. So if you click on that, you'll get a new code stub here. So this is what you'll get. And he says this is a private subroutine called button 1 mouse down event, and it handles button 1 mouse down. Okay, so let's think about the arguments that we have in the in this event. So, or in this code stub. So we have this should be a space here. It should be by val and sender. I'm sure on your, of course, on your in your code you'll see it like that. So we have that one. We have sender, and we also have E. Now sender is still, well, is of object type, but E, this is different than what we had before a little bit. What did we have before? Here's what we had before, system.event args. Now we have something different here, system Windows Forms mouse event args. So it's a bit different. So it's a different type of object. So he says it's still called E, but it's a different type of object. So E stands for a different type of object here. But really, we focus on this part of the name, and it's the mouse event args. In other words, these are variables that are associated with the mouse event. Now you might try and access different properties of this, so you might try and play around with that. Maybe even try and print out some of the properties or use a message box to show them. So he says what's being stored inside the E variable, and the answer is it's information about the mouse event. In other words, did you click a button? If so, which one? The only thing you need to do to detect which button was pressed is to access a property of the E variable. Let's see how to do that. So it's pretty straightforward. You just do this, E.button. Now when you type E, so if you suppose you start to type this statement, you type if E period, then you're going to see all of this. The IntelliSense will show you this. And so you'll see that one of the things that you can access, one of the properties of the E object is the button property. So he says, as soon as you type the letter E, you'll see this pop-up box. To detect which button was clicked, you need the first property on the list, button. Double-click this property and add it to your code. Then, after you type the equal sign, so after you type this, then this will come up. Another pop-up list appears. This one. So we're going to choose this one from the list, windows.forms.mouse-button.right. So what is that? So we're going to say this, if E.button equals this. So in other words, what? If if it was the right button that was clicked, then we're going to do something. Then we're going to send this message box and say right button clicked. So the point here is that you can access different properties of this E object. And as I said, you can play around with it and see what other properties you can access. Okay, let's try the same mouse down, but when we're going to be trying to click on the form and have the mouse down event. So stop your program. When you are returned to the coding environment, click the down arrow of button 1 at the top of the code. So go back up to here and click over here. And this time choose Form 1 events. Select the highlighted Form 1 events, and what you're going to and then select the mouse down list from the the mouse down from the list of available events, and you're going to see this. Okay, so what about this? What does this show? So first of all, it handles mybase.mouseDown. So mybase refers to the form itself. So we're going to be handling a mouse down event on the form. So we can now respond whenever someone clicks on the form, we can have something happen. So we do the same kind of thing. We do let's see. So we're going to have the same code, e.button, mouse button.right, then, and you just have a different message box here. So it says the if statement is the same, exactly the same. Run your program and test it out. Click anywhere on the form, and you'll get this message. Anywhere except if you click on the button. If you click on the button, you'll get the original message box. Now he says you can also do this. Define this as an integer and this as an integer, or declare them both as integers, and then do e.button if e.button equals mouse button.right. Then you can do this. This is another property of the event e, or the variable, well, no, the event e, and or the object e, and one is e.x and another is e.y, and that will tell you exactly where the user has clicked using the right mouse button, because we did this. It'll tell you exactly where the user has clicked. Now that could be obviously very useful in a game, if you're making a game. He says the x property returns, so this property, the x property returns how far across from left to right the mouse is. So if you click all the way on the left, x would be 0. And if you and the y property returns how far down. So if you click all the way up and to the left, both would be 0. And then as you move to the right and down, they both increase. So he says if you click near the top of the form, you'll see that the y position number go down in value. In other words, it's going to be a small number. And if you click near the bottom of the form, you'll see it go up in value, and so on. So you can test that out. Okay, so there are other events that you can consider, like the key down event. So that tells you what key was pressed. So you can go and read this. Notice though that this event is now of type System Windows Forms Key Event Args. So basically it's telling you properties associated with a key event. Means when someone presses a key. And let's go on to, so here you can see, like, did they press the key F, did they press the key F1, and so on. So you can test these out and see what they do, explore them, and this takes the key code and converts it to the actual letter. So you have to do that. So e.keycode and convert this, and then you'll get the actual letter of the key, because the code doesn't correspond to the actual letter. You have to convert it using this. Convert it into a character. The code will be like a number, and then this will convert that number to the letter that was pressed. So you can try this. Okay, and one more. The form load event. So this is an event that occurs right when the form loads, right when it appears on the screen. In other words, once you start the debugging and the form appears on the screen, that event occurs. So you can have stuff happen right when the form loads. So he suggests different things that you might want to have happen. You could just have a message box, which wouldn't be so interesting. But you can also, when the form loads, you can disable a particular button if you want to. So the way you do this again is you choose the Form 1 event, and then you can just add your code. And these are the things that you can do. Okay, we'll move on to a discussion of objects next class. And also for additional homework for this week is I want you to create the form or forms for your final project and submit those as a separate homework assignment. So in other words, you don't have to have the code in there. In fact, you shouldn't have the code in there. I want you to make the form though, and then of course later on when you finish the project you're going to add code to the form. But I want you to design the form for your final project and submit that for next week.